Hello and welcome to Shape the System, where we find and tell the stories that help people to rethink the way the world works. We interview people from all over the world who are helping to change our systems for the better. Shape the System is an independent podcast with support from KPMG High Growth Ventures, who help ambitious founders and their teams scale up for success. More about KPMG High Growth Ventures after the interview. We hope you enjoy this episode.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Shape the System. Today joined by Dan McKenna. How are you, Dan?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. We're going to be talking about, I think I'm probably going to put the wrong term on this. It's not really social. Affordable housing, probably the right?
No.
Let's put us in the zone here.
Yeah, so we're, a not-for-profit housing developer, essentially. So
Yes.
We work with community housing providers who provide affordable housing. We allocate percentages of our buildings to affordable housing. But I think using us as, capital A affordable housing isn't quite right.
Right.
We have a broad range of different offerings.
Brilliant. Okay, well, we'll jump into your offerings in a little bit. I want to get to that. I want to understand, though, the space in which you're operating generally in terms of, like, how does that work today and what's fundamentally wrong with that space in Australia or even more broadly?
Yeah, so I'm trained as an architect, and we're born out of a group of pretty frustrated architects who had been employed by, I guess you would say, kind of uninspired property developers for the last 10 to 15 years who are putting together, 5, 6 story, 10-story apartment buildings across our cities. And I think with the climate crisis we're right in the middle of at the moment, people really understand that density is important and density is what we need to be doing.
Right.
But historically, as Australians, we don't really have a culture of density done well. So enter a group of architects who really just wanted to pick the eyes out of great European models that have been happening for hundreds of years because they've had to, and start to implement that into our cities in Australia. So that's kind of the short of where we started.
Got it. So before we get to the Nightingale project specifically, but this which is one of the kind of ways this is sort of going out, there is actually the kind of the genesis of this is actually we need to have higher density in Australian cities if we're going to do our part in terms of use of resources, and not just the use of the resources and the materials, right, but also like the efficiency of these buildings going forward, right? Yeah,
definitely.
And so just let's try and quantify this problem, because I think, like, I've done some work with a company called eTool that does life cycle analysis on buildings and the materials in buildings, and so I have some understanding of this being part of it. What's the footprint of residential construction, this type of thing, in climate generally? Like, what are we talking about here?
It's off the top, like it's crazy big. I believe that the construction industry is like the number two in terms of carbon emissions globally. Right. So
and that's just the building of the buildings, not even living in cities and having to drive huge distances. So
exactly. So there's all these knock-on effects that architects absolutely get, because that is how we've been trained and how we've been trained to think. And so I think the frustration was that further and the architect has kind of gotten further and further away from being in the position to be able to make those decisions and decide how the city should be planned.
Right.
And so this was, our solution is kind of one attempt to take back control a little bit and do density well, because there's just such a knock-on effect.
Right. And let's just drill in on that for a second. So you talked about the European model or some examples in Europe, and then you just used the words doing density well. Give me a bit more color on that.
I think, look, European countries, Scandinavian countries, even parts of the US have been forced through population to have to deal with density. And so people living on top of people living on top of people isn't a bad thing.
Right.
Whereas we're a very young country and a kind of naive country in so many ways, and we've had so much space for such a long time that we've never ever had to really engage with this properly. Even it's really only our generation now that is actually starting to understand the implications of it. So whereas 30, 40 years ago, the goal was to get out of the city and to get your own block of land. And and that was the great Australian dream. So it's now only that we're seeing the effects of, if everybody wants that, and that is what we're all striving for, that things are going to fall apart, and things are falling apart. So
right. And then, so just coming back to what good looks like, if you take the Scandinavian model, I don't know what that is, but using that as a baseline, like what are the hallmarks of good medium density or high density in this context?
I think design plays a big part. Thermal performance is not something that's beautiful and gets on the front page of magazines, but we build really poorly here in Australia. We have some of the coldest and hottest houses in the extremities of our seasons. So thermal performance, insulation, windows, acoustic performance, things like that, private open space. Obviously, I live in an apartment. I live in our first building that we've done, and we don't have a backyard, but we have a shared rooftop, and the community's, there's only 20 apartments in this building, and it's small enough that we know everyone and we're comfortable hanging out on the rooftop, and just kind of little things like that, activating the ground floor. We don't have car parks in this building, so we don't have a garage grill, facing our street. So instead of that, we have a little cafe, a little parkway out the front. So just little bits and pieces that are harder to do financially and commercially, and so there, we pull out a lot of stuff that we think isn't necessary materially, and things like cars and air conditioners and things like that, because if you design the building right, you don't actually need air conditioners in our climate. So lots and lots of little pieces about how it's worked overseas historically that we think people are pretty ready for. And when we started doing this, there was a lot of hesitation from, sadly, real estate agents and people who are at the forefront of the market, essentially saying, no, people won't want this, people won't want that. And then we've just seen that kind of this explosion of interest of, we've got a massive supply issue. We don't have a demand issue. We just have thousands and thousands of people signing up on our website who are really, really keen on what we do. So,
and I think part of that, I've only looked at the Nightingale Housing project specifically, but if that ethos is coming from a larger place, my guess is there's a whole bunch of people who aren't looking for a quarter-acre block and don't want to be in a soulless box in the CBD.
And there's nothing in between.
There's nothing in between, right? So there's a whole bunch of people who are like, I do want to be part of a community. I don't need to own my own block of land. I don't want to live in the country, but I don't want to just go into my apartment from my garage in my lift and never see anyone. And I also hate that existence as well. And so there's obviously a core set of people. Is there anything that kind of, like, if you had to describe that group of people that defines and unifies that group of people, like what's the shared thread outside of the desire to have that kind of living, do you think?
Yeah, like a lot of the people that we started as a group of architects, so we talked to a lot of architects, and so we had a lot of graduate architects, and that was 2015, 2016, and now we've kind of breached past that into the wider community, and the people that come to us are particularly interested in sustainability, so environmental sustainability. I think year on year, everybody's getting way more aware and way more educated on how they live and how that impacts the planet. So the way we design our buildings ticks a lot of boxes for people, so people want to live as sustainably as they possibly can. And then the other one is community as well. People absolutely get it, and especially the last 18 months that we're seeing that, we're all stuck in our homes and can't go into offices and can't interact with people. I think that, community and social connection, and it's not a it's not a kind of intimidating level of
Kumbaya
social connection. And I think
every time you see each other in the hallway cooking lentils together thing.
I think that's what we have struggled in terms of the perception of Nightingale. Sometimes people go, whoa, ease up, guys. That sounds a little bit too much. But it's actually just designing the building in such a way that facilitates, casual interactions with people, casual interactions with your neighbours to sort of slowly grow connections over time. And then when you do need to reach out or need support or vice versa, that your neighbours are there. And part of that is keeping community sizes as low as we possibly can. So
this
that there's
is the 20
not
people you were talking about, or the 20?
Well, our building's got 20 front doors, 20 apartments in it. So there's, everyone in the building, people's parents and people's families, and there's just kind of this good, I guess, number before you start to breach that into, I don't know who that guy is. Oh, should I have opened the door for him? That sort of thing.
Yeah.
So the people that we talk to, big into sustainability, big into community, and then also cost and affordability. We talk to a lot of first home buyers because that dream of a quarter acre block is becoming less and less appetizing and less realistic for so many people of our generation. I think
from a pure cost perspective, you mean?
Yeah. It's like trying to purchase anything on one wage is very, very difficult. And then two wages is very, very difficult. So we've got different financial mechanisms, and also in the way we design the building as well, for all of our buildings, to keep things as financially and economically as efficient as we possibly can, to give people that opportunity to get in and then have secure housing, have their own place, and then if it's 2, 4, 5, 10 years, however long they last there. So it's that they're the three biggest things.
And in looking at the Nightingale one, which we will get onto in a little bit, specifically, and this might be me projecting a little bit, but it's a beautiful building, right? And obviously everyone wants a beautiful place to live, so it might be a moot point, but so often you see these, if we talk about the faceless, soulless, 200-story things, these things aren't beautiful and then maybe that's subjective, but is that part of the kind of the ethos of a lot of what people want, is that they are architects, or they're 2 steps removed and want beautifully designed things? How does that play into that?
Yeah, definitely. Architecture is a big part of what we do, and design is a big part of what we do, and simplicity as well. I think, I worked as an architect on Nightingale 1 on this building that I live in, and this is pre-Nightingale Housing being a thing, and Nightingale was just an idea, and it was one building, and it was, at that time, and this is typical of a lot of architects, generally it's your clients are the top 3% of the community of people who you have that budget to be able to design every single corner and have this beautiful thing that has all the bells and whistles. And I think, it's a little bit frustrating when there's so much inequality and there's so many other things happening in the world, that is where architects have sort of landed over decade after decade of change. So I think all of the architects that we work with in all of our buildings absolutely love the Nightingale project and the Nightingale brief, because it's just about restrained simplicity and beauty as well, and robust, honest materials that really age well over time, as opposed to kind of plasterboard boxes that things that you can tell 3 years after you've moved in that it's time to move out, sort of thing.
Being very diplomatic.
I've lived in many of these places.
I feel like I nearly bought one of those places when I first moved to Sydney, actually. Yeah, that's super interesting. And you made a point, I think, just before we jumped on, actually, around kind of, and you actually reaffirmed it, putting architects back in the centre of this thing, and then kind of cross-pollinating that with this idea that a very small number of people now get the opportunity to use an architect to live in a space that's beautifully designed and well designed, and what's coming full circle there, do you think? Is it that there's an appetite now for developers to say you can't just turn out this rubbish anymore, you've got to your stuff's got to get better, the market is becoming more empowered for the consumer, or the architects are going, I don't want to be part of this rubbish anymore? Like, what's happening?
I think it's both. I think it's absolutely both. That we started however many years ago, and now we've seen in our little circle that we operate in Melbourne, and a little bit wider than that, the property developers getting better and realizing that the market actually wants what we're trying to push, and they care about sustainability, and they care about design, they care about longevity, and it's not just about a beautiful image, in a marketing pack that gets people in, and then exactly. It's
they always look amazing, don't they?
Yeah, and it's if you get anything that's half as good as that, you'd be lucky. So I think there's definitely an appetite from it's all market driven. So we talk to thousands of people, and only a small percentage of them will get into Nightingale Homes, because we haven't done a hell of a lot, and we're getting bigger and we're scaling, but there's still this absolute overflow of people who miss out. So those people go elsewhere and go, well, I care about sustainability. I want to live here for 10 years minimum. I want to stay here for the rest of my life, sort of thing. So they know the questions to ask, and then architects, designers, builders have that opportunity to make something great. I think where we, try and dig our heels in a little bit is to say that shouldn't cost a premium. You shouldn't have to pay above and beyond for sustainability or quality. It shouldn't just be for those top 3% who can afford it.
And I guess that's where I was going to go with that, was that if you create a set of market conditions where developers work out, wow, you can add all these bells and whistles like nice design and sustainability and durability, and people will pay more for that. Like, okay, sure, but it'd be great if that was the norm rather than seeing it as a way to upsell the McFry kind of option with it. And so it's good that it's dragging the market forward in a way, but a lot of what you're doing specifically with Nightingale is actually about going back the other way and saying this stuff should be expected at every level of the market, right?
Yes, agreed, absolutely. And that's why we've shifted to a not-for-profit, so we can sort of, again, take another step and say, well, there is no incentive for profit in our model. We're doing all of these things, and we're putting in 20% community housing and all these little layers that traditional developers would go, oh, well, that's going to make it 5% more expensive. That's going to make it 5% more expensive, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. So that's what we're trying to prove. And, each year everybody gets better and the standard goes up, and we want to really challenge ourselves to continue to push out the front, because we know that, we're growing, we're a small team, but we want to, I guess, advocate for this space and push others to get there as well.
Yeah, to challenge themselves on it. And so, let's get to Nightingale specifically. So the way Nightingale's set up is that that is a particular project that's out of this ethos, but it sounds like you're going to replicate the Nightingale project, and you've done one, and you're obviously doing two at the moment, I think. Is that right?
No, we've done heaps. I say heaps, and that number is about 15 probably.
Okay. All under this not-profit housing model?
So it's I guess our evolution is a long story in itself, but Nightingale 1, the building I'm in at the moment, was one building, the first building, led by Breathe Architecture, where I used to work.
Yep.
And then off the back of that, we set up a licensing model to say that, you can do a Nightingale, everyone can do it. And it's just access.
Oprah Winfrey kind of moment, throwing Nightingales out.
Exactly. You get one. And so that was when Nightingale Housing was formed. And so I left Breathe Architecture and I started working at Nightingale Housing. And that was 2015, 2016. Mm-hmm. And so the idea was we would license as many architects across the country as we possibly could to empower them with the IP that we had developed to go and take this model and replicate it in Sydney, in Brisbane, in Perth, and other parts of the city, parts of the country.
Yep.
That we issued about 35 licenses, and out of that, we only had 3 built projects. So it was actually really, really difficult for architects who are trained as amazing architects to go and raise money and to purchase sites and run feasibilities and engage with builders. And we're asking architects to be developers, essentially.
Right.
And so off the back of that, we've shifted again, and we've sort of closed off the licensing model and started to take more control within Nightingale Housing. So we employ development managers, and we employ project managers and finance managers and comms people and community engagement. Mm-hmm. And we also engage architects to be architects and to do what they do. Right. So we raise funding, we go and purchase the sites. And then, through that process, we've probably got about 15 projects underway. Some of them very close to construction completion, some in planning, and some kind of in early stages of design. So, it's grown a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the mechanism here, though, is that there is a housing a project that basically has a bunch of the IP that you've already sort of learned about. How do you design these things well with, sustainability and durability and thermal performance? It's a new word I learned today. I was thinking of like kind of Bond's underwear thermal performance, but clearly
same thing.
Kind of same concept. So that's the problem with being in the Blue Mountains. Everything's about temperature now. Okay, so you take this model and that vertically integrated model, but from the kind of, I'm going to call it the customer's perspective, let's say you've got 20 apartments in there.
Yeah.
You're essentially building them and marketing them and selling them as a non-profit.
Yeah.
Does that make all of them like significantly more affordable, or is there some that are less affordable and some that are more affordable so that there is actually affordable housing and they're all cheaper than what the developer would normally charge? How does it look from the purchaser's perspective is my question.
Yes. No, you've absolutely nailed it, because I've just been going through this. I do all the pricing for all the apartments.
Right.
So as a whole building, yes, it is cheaper than market.
Got it.
In saying that, you can go and find something cheaper. Absolutely can. But it's going to be an absolutely different level of quality.
Right.
It's going to be single glazed, your typical stuff that we've all kind of seen.
Right.
And so, yes, that is cheaper, but in terms of value for money, like the windows and doors that we put into these apartments, the floors, the joinery, everything is of a really, really high standard and built to last.
Mm-hmm.
But because we don't have a profit motive, that flows through to the feasibility, that flows through to the ticket price of the apartment itself. And then we also do allocate 20% of each building to community housing providers, and then they run through
the managed service or whatever it is.
Yeah. And so that also has implications on the entire project feasibility and then, that remaining 80%, obviously there's going to be some that are cheaper than average and some that are higher than average. So yeah, it's a kind of long-winded answer to say yes, because we don't have that.
You've got all the time in the world here, by the way.
Yeah. Without that big fat chunk of profit at the bottom of our feasibility, it enables us to do things totally differently and think about things totally differently.
Right. And you sort of touched on this before, right? Like if you're not trying to necessarily offload the thing and use the capital to buy the next thing, and the people are coming in with a view to live in there for 10 or 15 years, and even potentially sell it without a gain attached to it, which we'll talk about in a sec, then like how do you make decisions, right? You make this from a developer perspective or designer and architect perspective, you make totally different decisions, I would have thought.
Definitely. And that's why and I'm a resident as well, and a handful of people that work for us are residents. So really, we make these decisions through the residents' lens.
Yeah, right.
And we learn.
In a practical sense, like you're actually the people who are going to buy it are part of the decision-making process.
Yes and no. I think early days we started, and in our first couple of buildings, that was a big part of it. It was deliberative design. It was, we ballot, we get the 35, 40 people in the community together, and then we'll have workshops and things like that. But I think it's a really hard way to design a building, and it's actually not. That's not true. It's a really hard way to design an affordable, efficient, financially driven building. I think you could absolutely do that, and we could all sit around and just add cost and cost and cost and cost and cost, and then it would be something very, very different, which is not what we're trying to do. So we engage with residents. We collaborate, and we bring the community on board really, really early and keep them involved. But in terms of you picking what tap you want and you picking what floor you want, all of a sudden you lose all cost control when you go down that path.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the most efficient form of government's benevolent dictatorship.
Yes, yes.
I mean, and to be fair as well, I think you talked right up front about the ethos and the values, and a lot of the people I would imagine who are buying for these ethos and values. They kind of need to let you do your job to create an amazingly beautiful, durable, lovely, warm space. So
and there's a lot of trust. And people have definitely grown to trust us over time and just say, cool, you guys have got this. I know you work with the best architects, the best builders. Let me know when it's done, and then we'll move in.
Happily move in.
Yeah.
And go straight to the rooftop and hang out.
Yes, absolutely. And we'll be there.
Because I live here too. But just talk me through this. One part of it I was reading on the Nightingale site talked about this idea that when someone buys a place, they can't then pass it on for profit. Like, talk me through just some mechanics of that. I'm just curious.
Yeah, it was a great idea that we had so many years ago, and now we've had to jump through so many different legal iterations to actually see this play out. But the idea being that if we've built you an apartment and its market value is $800,000, but we're selling it to you for $700,000 or $650,000, then you can't go the week after you move into a real estate agent and go, I'm selling my place, it's worth $800, I'm getting $800, and then just capture that $150. So we've put a retail restriction deed on all the contracts of sale, so it caps the maximum resale value, the value you can resell it for. And it importantly links your price to the increase in housing in that suburb over the period of time. So if housing has gone up by 10%, you can sell your place at 10%. If it's gone up by 30%, you can sell your place what you bought it times 30%.
Right.
Importantly, we link it to housing and not to apartments, because the way we design these buildings are like homes. And we think about them like homes, and it's very, very different. And that's why you don't see much fluctuation or increase in apartment prices through our cities, because it's something very different.
Right.
So that's kind of the high level of how the resale restrictions work. We've only just started to see them roll over and people start to move through different stages of life and resell their apartments. Importantly, because we have such a very, very strong following and a strong database, we don't need real estate agents to do this. We just get the person to take some photos on an iPhone if they want, and then we put them on our website and send an email out, and then, a couple of weeks later,
offers for that. And the price is not really up for debate, so that makes it a lot easier too.
Yeah. And so I guess it's a tool to try and embed some of that affordability that the person's got in, round one for the life of the apartment. I think it's a blunt tool. It's not a perfect tool, but what it does do is it gets the right people in the door day one. Because if you're coming in thinking, oh, awesome, these things are crazy good and I'm going to get a bargain and then I'm going to make some serious cash here. Yeah, that it's really hard to build a community with that because people are there for different reasons. And so it just gets the right people in the door on day one. And then everyone's kind of thinking about this for a 5, 10, 15-year proposition, however long it is.
I think I was thinking as much as anything, it's a selection tool versus just a how do we pass the value on. Of course, yes, you should do that. But I think from a community building perspective, it's awesome.
Yeah.
Hey, just it was like a lot of the people we interview on the podcast are working in some kind of impact. Well, they're all working in impact, essentially. That's the whole point of the show. But a good chunk of them go down the kind of social venture route, and a fair number of them stay in the non-profit. Like, help me understand why you landed in non-profit versus social venture, and like how that decision kind of arrived.
We initially went for full non-for-profit, full DGR status way back when we initially started.
Right.
And I wasn't involved in the process, but a bunch of lawyers said, oh, no, you guys can't do that. So we landed with social enterprise. Yeah, lawyers are good at saying that.
Yeah.
And so we've been a social enterprise for the last couple of years, and as we've scaled, we've never, ever been for profit. We've never taken profit. This hasn't been how our organisation has been structured, how our business is structured. So the shift to a not-for-profit was an incredibly logical one for us, but also it helped us, I guess, validate who we are within the wider community as we gained more attention and more publicity and more media for people to go, oh, okay, I understand what this is. Because when people look at us and go, oh, cool, someone has to be making a lot of money somewhere along the line. Someone's making cash. But when you get in under the hood, there's no one making a lot of cash, I think. And so the not-for-profit status is just, I guess, validation of that there's no way that Nightingale can be monetized, and that's not what we're here for. We're here for our mission.
Interesting. So let me just make sure I understand that. So initially when you set up way back when, 2014, whatever it was, then you were set up as a social enterprise, but essentially a normal company. And we're just going to choose not to make profits.
Yes.
But coming back full circle, you're like, well, if we call ourselves a non-profit and we actually become one, then people will believe us.
We'll exactly.
keep doing what we were doing anyway, but at least
we're not very good at making money. So let's just make it official.
I've been in startup for 20 years and make a joke that most startups are non-profits as well.
Yeah, they just don't know it. Yeah, it's very true.
That's really interesting. I mean, I think a lot of the time, you don't realize kind of the impact that one small thing will have on the overall messaging. I think in finance, where I've been doing a bit of work, people equate time and effort. And so if you say something's going to take 20 minutes, then they think, well, this is only 20 minutes worth of effort, even if there's a lot of other things that have to happen downstream of that you can equate those two things. And by enabling something to happen faster, their read of that is this will be easier for me, even though something that takes 20 minutes can actually be incredibly hard for those 20 minutes, even though it only takes 20 minutes when you do it. And so just interesting that people would come and look at non-profit and go, okay, cool, I have a far greater degree of trust that this organisation is actually operating as a non-profit, and therefore they aren't, secretly hiving, putting funds out somewhere else.
Yeah.
Just because I mean, all puns aside, it absolutely takes a village to bring a development to market.
Yep.
And if you even go to your site and there's a bunch of partners listed, I'm curious as to the relationship that you have with those partners and how that might look like or different from how those partnerships might look or vendor relationships might look in an ordinary property development kind of context?
Yeah, I think a lot of our partners really connect with what we're doing in terms of sustainability. I think in the construction industry, everybody, worth their salt understands what the impact that we're all having, and manufacturing and big companies. So we're partners with big companies like Fisher Paykel and PPG Taubmans. And so they see us as industry leaders and really, really pushing how to do sustainability within architecture, within construction, to the absolute best. So that's where the partnership works really well. They love what we're doing and they really want to support what we're doing. And so with that partnership, every one of our kitchens has, the best induction cooktops, and we pay a hell of a lot less than if we just went down to Harvey Norman and just bought whatever to put into our building. So it means that flows through, because we're a not-for-profit, it flows through to the resident who pays X for their kitchen, but they're actually getting the 12-speed oven or the 12-function oven rather than the 7-function oven.
Interesting. So probably has a longer warranty as well, I'm guessing.
Yeah, it's just like, you could times that by 1,000 across one specific building of all these little bits and pieces. And then as we go again and again and again, we just kind of sit down and reassess, especially with our partners and architects and collaborators, and go, okay, cool, where can we get better? Where can we get better? And I think the challenge is we always want to be better than our last project, but more doesn't necessarily equal better. I think simplicity and paring things back is probably our next challenge, to go, okay, cool, how do we make this more efficient, simpler, neater, more affordable, and so our partners have a big role to play in that.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'd sort of imagined that they would be like, we're super keen to supply you with the range hood, but here's the price list. And you'd be like, that's not really going to help us as much as you working out how to be on board with the mission. And part of that is cost, obviously. Part of it might be, co-designing these products or understanding how these products will actually work, and helping to understand what it is that we should be using in the context that we're using. Super interesting kind of model on that. And I can see that in the kind of product provider sense, but in the service provider sense, does it play out slightly differently, like the person who's providing their time rather than the physical object?
Yes. I think we work Nightingale projects are hard. I think we need to all agree that we are absolutely not business as usual. And so all of our collaborators and all of our subconsultants who work on our buildings are absolutely up for the journey and up for the fight and want to have some impact. And that said, for all the people that work at Nightingale as well, we definitely don't do your kind of off-the-shelf projects. And so, with that, it's an investment of time, it's an investment of energy, but with that, we get the most incredibly passionate and smart and amazing people coming through our projects that take us to another level. So I think the people we work with, the partners we work with, everybody kind of really, really wants to be, pulling in the same direction, which is it's energizing.
Yeah, it sounds amazing. And you talked right up front about you have a demand problem. I mean, not that there's probably an inside track, but how do you manage that demand problem? Obviously, go out and build more, but
we try to. We're trying to build as much as we possibly can, but I think we care too much about quality to scale too aggressively, because we're too stressed about losing that quality and losing that, our reputation as people who do really, really good work. So, I started back in the day with an Excel spreadsheet of 20 people's names who just emailed us and said, hey, if you do another building, let us know. And that's now grown to a list of nearly 15,000 people who've signed up through our website to say, I really want to live in a Nightingale home. So we've gotten a lot smarter about how we talk to those people and engage with those people, and we use that list to sort of push us and pull us and tell us where the next step for us is. But I think all we can do is really, really work hard to find more sites and find more partners and build more housing and go out to ballot more and more.
I'm sorry, I'm just doing the maths in my head. At 20 apartments, that's like 700 more developments. You're going to be
we've sort of, we're now doing Nightingale Village, which is 6 different buildings across the street. We bought a street a couple of years ago. So we've chopped that up into 6 different buildings by 6 architects. And so There's 203 apartments across that. So that's, some buildings have 35, some have 37.
Yeah.
So we're sort of getting bigger as we go.
50 of those. Still a lot.
Yeah, correct. We still have an issue. Yes.
Yeah, they're going to be busy for a while. You talked about quality as being kind of a challenge here in terms of how do you scale quality. I think that's a challenge generally, right?
Yeah.
Is that the main constraint, or is there other kind of one or two constraints in terms of finding suitable sites or finding the developers who believe what you guys believe? Like, what are the other two or three big kind of limiting factors here?
The biggest, initially, it was access to funding and investment and finance, and as we've grown and gotten better at what we do and done more projects and proved our worth, I think that's eased, and we have a lot of really great partners who absolutely see what we do as important. The biggest challenge we've got is access to land and access to sites, and so. Right. The harsh reality is, we compete in the open market next door to,
the
straight to market.
Make a profit, who can help
and people who are willing to take a punt and go, well, I think I can make this much money off this site, so I'm going to go for it.
Auction.
Yeah, and so we get outbid often, so we have to get kind of creative about how we find sites and how we instigate projects. So that's probably the single biggest issue that we have in terms of easing that demand that we've got. Yeah.
I'll tell you what, though, as soon as you get through that 15,000, you're going to have another 50,000. It's not like all right, we're all done. Everyone
we're done. Everybody's housed.
Everyone pause and take a breath.
Yeah, never.
That's super cool. And so you talked before about having worked on this for a while. You've been involved. You're in the first Nightingale 1.
Yes.
Did you just go, let's not worry about coming up with more names, we'll just add numbers to them? Talk me through the naming category.
The naming convention it's an evolving beast. We still haven't quite nailed it. Well, we initially started and we had Nightingale 1, then we had Nightingale 2, then we had Nightingale 3. And then we hit, 30, and number 8 was happening before number 6, and number 5 was, and then we went, okay, this isn't a good idea because,
we're confusing the crap out of ourselves, let alone anyone else.
It's not a logical linear thing, construction. So we then shifted in Nightingale Village, and there's Nightingale Sky House and Nightingale Evergreen and Nightingale Courtyard. So it's really down to the architects and the project team about how that naming convention happens for their community. And a lot of them have actually engaged with their residents and gone through a naming strategy and a naming process with their residents. Right. So it is still evolving, but we've definitely stepped away from the numbers. I think there's some beauty in Nightingale 1 and Nightingale 2, but other than that,
it's kind of messy after that. But just coming back to numbers, so you're on this journey, you've been on this journey for 5 or 6 years by the sound of it.
Yep. Maybe a bit more. Yeah.
Or 21. I'm trying to understand the arc of the story as to how you and how the people who are at the kind of the core of this sort of arrived to be working on this stuff. I mean, some of it sounds like it's architects getting frustrated and wanting to be closer to the kind of thing they want to see in the world. Is that sort of how this landed for you and the other main people involved? Like, what's
definitely me personally. I studied architecture, and then I started working as a student at Breathe Architecture, run by Jeremy and Tamara, who that was the birth of Nightingale in a little back garage in Brunswick back in sort of 2011, 2012, 2013. Mm-hmm. We worked on a lot of big developer-led projects, and were pretty frustrated at the meetings we were in and the conversations that we were having, and the lack of ability to actually have impact.
Right.
And so Jeremy, the founder of Nightingale, Jeremy and Tamara, just thought, all right, well, let's stop complaining and let's raise some money and let's do one ourselves. And and the classic line within our office is, how hard can it be? That's Jeremy's tagline. And we
are 7 years later,
and
still
it's
trying
very
to work out and the things.
And it sort of hurts us all when we laugh and say it, because every turn we go, it is hard. It's just not easy, and there's a reason that things work out the way they do. So that's kind of how we started, and then I kept working as an architect for a while, and then Nightingale Housing itself started as a separate company, and so I was the first employee of Nightingale Housing.
Yeah, right. Amazing.
And now we've got 15, 16 of us bouncing around different parts of the world.
Of the world, specifically, literally? Or
well, I say the world, just Victoria? Melbourne at the moment. Great.
But
we've sort of
That's the
outgrown our
world we are
office.
living in, by the way, so that's fine.
Yeah. We're sort of half at home, half around, half in the office, those sorts of things.
Sure.
But yeah, that's kind of where I started, and as a graduate architect coming through, I think it was really exciting to be part of that. And those very, very early stages to go, oh wow, we can have some real impact here, and I'm going to run this to ground and going to see where it goes. And like any startup organization, there's in 6 months' time it might not exist, and we all kind of knew that at the time, but we're still changing and evolving 5, 6, 7 years later, and getting stronger and getting more confident in what we do and better at what we do, and it's still very exciting. It is still very hard though. It's not. It's definitely not as easy as we thought looking in from the outside.
Yeah, I mean, I'm actively out looking for things like this, and it only came across my desk, a few months ago.
Yeah,
and you've been at it for 7 years. I think so much of this is how do you get these things out to market and get them well known? Obviously, you're in that place now, which is amazing. Just, I guess, as a one final question, like, what's the next major kind of hill to be taken for you guys in terms of this is when we can get over this thing, then we're like in a different trajectory from our perspective?
Oh, there's so much. I think carbon positive buildings, I think that would be incredibly amazing.
Like just lifting the design output quality of the whole thing, which is, it's fine that we're here, but how do we challenge ourselves even further from a design perspective? Are kind of the big hills to be taken.
Definitely from a sustainability perspective, I think. And then from a financial perspective as well, we're within a market that is just scary what's going on out there in terms of housing affordability, and we're working so hard, but we're still buying sites in that market. So any kind of nut to crack that open, that will be incredible, because we will absolutely go down that rabbit hole. I think community is something we're doing well and we're getting better at. But there's always room to improve. So I guess the answer is we don't know. We're trying in all different directions, and we really just need to focus on one and just do that really well.
I think you're doing pretty well, Dan, in my book.
Thanks.
It's amazing. Well, Dan, we'll leave it there for today. It was super interesting. I actually have a bunch more questions, but I think we'll cover those all separately.
Go on for hours.
We'll do a check-in, but I think as well, like, just interesting on that point, if you can create something that people want to get behind from a building perspective, like you've done, like an architecture and a design and even a development perspective, at some point you're going to create a pathway for people who have access to capital and want to get their capital behind something as part of an overall desire for them to be doing more and adding more value with their capital, still getting a return on their capital, but doing it more than just making money.
Yeah.
So my guess is you're already heading in the right direction to start unlocking beast mode with respect to that capital land problem.
Let's hope so. Yeah. Fingers crossed.
If anyone's listening who's got a bunch of capital, start rethinking about your allocation. Exactly. Well, thank you again, Dan. Really pleasure having you on the show.
Thanks for having me. Awesome. Thanks, Vincent.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Shape the System. As usual, if you'd like to suggest a guest, someone that you know who's helped change a system for the better, please go to www.shapethesystem.org, click on the top right-hand corner, then click Suggest Guest. Make sure that you click subscribe so that you get the new episode. Shape the System is an independent podcast with support from KPMG High Growth Ventures. Connects founders to the services they need along their journey. Whether you are looking to refine your strategy, mature your finance function, prepare for a capital raise, expand abroad, or simply comply with regulatory requirements, they provide you with the support you need to drive your business forward.